When I was asked by my esteemed colleague Jessica to provide opening remarks on behalf of the network, pointing to the importance of faith actors in responding to this crisis, I had a range of things in mind that the network has been doing over the last few years, or how the climate emergency is impacting women and girls. But instead of boring you with what you probably already know, and to be true to my promise to never be conventional when times demand me to be a renegade, I will say this to you instead. We are, as Antonio Guterres said, sleepwalking into the climate catastrophe. The times are over where we can beat around the bush. The times are over where we can use diplomatic words to describe what we all know will be the end of the world as we know it. The times are over where we can simply talk the talk and take no action looking onto this disaster that's unfolding around us. We, as faith actors and feminists, have the responsibility to protect those most vulnerable to the looming disaster: women, girls, and marginalized communities. A young peace builder said in one of the other CSW side events that we cannot promote what we aren't ourselves. That's why I ask of all of you to become the peace you wish to see in the world, to use the great Reverend Martin Luther King's words. That's why, in the name of all our peace and prosperity, I ask the following of you. A, become vegan. Animal feed production takes up 75% of the world's farming area and constitutes the main source of deforestation in the world, threatening the ways of lives of uncountable indigenous communities and endangering the last remaining patches of primeval forests, but also rendering extinct many species of animals, holding up the delicate balance our nature relies upon. B, ride your bicycles and use public transportation. Automobiles are the main source of urban pollution, and the consumption of fossil fuels not only destroys our precious planet, but also funds war in Yemen, Ukraine, and elsewhere. Insulate your house, install a solar panel, or take off the jacket that you usually wear at work. But most of all, become a voice of change. Become a climate activist and convince people around you to join in. Become an agent for change, if only in your immediate or family surroundings. Being cognizant that the majority of greenhouse gases are emitted by a minority of people, and that the effects of the climate emergency are the strongest in communities that contributed the least to it, all the more important it is to make all voices heard, especially those of women and girls. Tomorrow, March 25th, there will be a global climate strike. Join millions of people to show your politicians that you do care. The time window left is narrow, but with our combined forces, we can still manage to limit global warming at 1.5 degrees. This, however, will require all of us to change our behaviors fundamentally. Women and girls are the most vulnerable to the effects of the climate crisis, but they're also the most important agents for change, which is why I'm looking forward to inspiring discussions and presentations today. But now, Rachel, let's watch this video on how and why faith actors are addressing the climate emergency.
The ecological crisis we face today is also called the triple planetary crisis of climate change, nature degradation, and pollution. COVID-19 has pushed back many of the achievements gained in the past 5 years in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. What has it taught us? That the vulnerability of people and ecosystems to climate change differs substantially. Now more than ever, participation of all sectors of society is required to reignite the momentum. Climate justice acknowledges and addresses the disproportionate social, economic, and public health impacts that climate change can have on underprivileged and marginalized populations around the world, including on women and girls. When presented with an estimate that 8 out of 10 people that are displaced by the climate crisis are women, the need for the global community to stand together to enhance protection measures becomes essential. Religious, spiritual, faith leaders, their communities, and faith-based organizations and institutions, broadly known as faith actors, offer far-reaching and dynamic responses. Faith actors have two important powers, the power of convincing and the power of convening. There is a need for these already rich institutions providing socio-economic support, humanitarian aid, to lead by example, integrate a gender transformative approach, uplift women and girls as leaders within new institutions, and commit to climate justice.
Mi nombre es Laura Sarabia y pertenezco a la Iglesia Luterana Buenas Nuevas El Paginal. Nos encontramos realizando nuestra tercera campaña de limpieza en el río Matizate. Todas estas acciones las realizamos para contrarrestar los efectos provocados por el cambio climático y así cuidar el planeta o mundo que Dios nos ha regalado a los seres humanos.
We call on people of all faiths to recognize their crucial role in developing feasible and innovative solutions to combat the climate crisis, including women and girls, and ensure climate justice for all.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Now I would like to introduce to you the moderator of today's panel session, Tanya Awad-Gorra, Senior Trainer in Nonviolent Communication, Diversity and Freedom of Religion and Belief from the Adyan Foundation. Please, Tanya.
Thank you so much, Simon. Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Lebanon. I'm really happy to be among all of you today, and I'm looking forward to learn a lot more about climate issues impacting people and especially women, what is being done and what needs to be done. So in our panel today, we're going to divide it into three parts. The first part will be addressing what climate issue is impacting your societies and your work, and maybe creating conflict in your region, and how is it impacting women especially. The second part is about what is being done now, how is it addressed in your communities and in your respective countries, and by women themselves and by your organizations. And the third part is what needs to be done and what are we looking for in the future. So let's start with the first part, with the first question. And before I ask it, since we're addressing the problematic side of climate issues, in my organization, we do not work on topics related directly to climate, but we are highly impacted by climate changes. I'll give you just an example. The majority of Syrian refugees in Lebanon living under tents in the Bekaa Mountains are women. And we have been witnessing one of the hardest winters in years this year. So women left under tents with snow, with water, with no heating system, left alone, are becoming more prone to violent acts, to become victims, and this impacts the work we want to do with them, because based on needs, when essential needs are lacking, they cannot, maybe they are not emotionally ready to receive the kind of trainings we want to address, which is coexistence, diversity, etc., and freedom of religion and belief. So, so it is really impacting our work. And now I would really like to listen to your part of the story, to your experiences. What climate issue is impacting, creating stress in your environment and maybe creating conflict, and how is it impacting specifically women? And since we are numerous in the room, I will ask you to raise your hand, and I will name the person and invite you to speak briefly if you can, so we can open it to everybody who wants to share with us, and we can listen to them. And by the way, could you please keep your mics muted unless you are speaking? That would be wonderful too. So who would like to share with us first? Renati, would you like to share with us what climate issue is creating environmental stress or potential in your community?
Sim, o meu nome é Renate Guiros, eu sou teóloga feminista, pastora luterana na Igreja Evangélica de Confissão Luterana no Brasil, trabalhando na Fundação Luterana de Diaconia como assessora em Justiça de Gênero da instituição. Na primeira lâmina que vocês veem, eu trago as logos dessas 3 instituições. E a Fundação Luterana de Diaconia, ela alberga 3 programas: o Conselho de Missão entre Povos Indígenas, o Centro de Apoio e Promoção da Agroecologia e o Programa de Pequenos Projetos. FLD é uma organização que atua com projetos nas áreas de justiça socioambiental, direitos e diaconia, justiça econômica, ajuda humanitária, defesa dos direitos dos povos indígenas, defesa e promoção da agroecologia, da segurança alimentar e de mercados justos e solidários. Atuação constituída a partir de parcerias com grupos populares, povos e comunidades tradicionais, com instituições, universidades, movimentos e organizações da sociedade civil. A FLD é uma organização com base de fé, confessionalmente vinculada à ISLB, que, por sua vez, é membro da Federação Luterana Mundial, a quem represento aqui neste painel. Na segunda lâmina, eu quero trazer para essa roda de diálogo o tema das violências contra mulheres e meninas indígenas, especificamente o caso da jovem de 14 anos, Daiane Griá Salles, do povo Caingangue, povo que vive no sul do Brasil. Poderia mudar para a segunda lâmina da projeção, por favor? Nesta segunda lâmina, quero mostrar para vocês o Brasil na América do Sul, a fim de que tenham uma visão um pouco mais concreta de quais lugares estou falando. O Rio Grande do Sul fica no extremo sul do país, cuja capital é Porto Alegre. É importante dizer que no Brasil, os povos indígenas não vivem somente no espaço da Amazônia Legal, mas também nos 3 estados do sul. O povo Caingangue é um deles, e o terceiro maior povo indígena em termos de população, sendo o Rio Grande do Sul em que se concentra a maior parte dela. A situação de invisibilidade dos povos indígenas na região sul contribui ao racismo e violência contra esses povos. A insegurança em terras protegidas, em função de invasões sobre terras indígenas, leva a situações de medo e insegurança para as mulheres indígenas em seus próprios territórios. Seus direitos e seus territórios são atacados pelo governo, com discursos de ódio e intolerância contra povos indígenas e com a concepção de uma necropolítica. A economia do agronegócio, da monocultura, do arrendamento de terras contribui para esta política de governo. Violências são amplificadas e afetam especialmente meninas e mulheres. E agora podemos passar para a terceira lâmina, por favor. E especialmente afetada foi a vida de Daiane Griá Salles, de 14 anos, que foi vítima de um feminicídio cruel e brutal nas proximidades da terra indígena Guarita, região sul do Brasil. A jovem foi encontrada morta, seminua e com a parte inferior do corpo dilacerada, depois de alguns dias desaparecida. O segmento do caso será feito pelo Escritório sobre Prevenção a Genocídio e a Responsabilidade de Proteger, da ONU, que estará no Brasil em abril deste ano, para um encontro com organizações indígenas, e o caso de Daiane Griá Salles será apresentado na oficina prevista. O envolvimento do escritório é resultado da apresentação de relatório denúncia sobre crimes atrozes no Brasil, levado pelo FEACT Brasil, o Fórum Ecumênico ACT Brasil, do qual a FLD, a Fundação, faz parte, em parceria com a articulação e monitoramento em direitos humanos no Brasil. A oficina de abril integra o processo preparatório para uma possível visita de Alice Vairimo Nderito, conselheira especial do secretário-geral da ONU sobre a prevenção de genocídio, possivelmente no mês de dezembro de 2022. O papel das organizações baseadas na fé é proteger a dignidade e a vida. Mulheres fazem isso constantemente e são mortas, assassinadas, pelo simples fato de serem mulheres. Isto é o que caracteriza o feminicídio. Fica a pergunta: feminicídio tem alguma relação com emergências climáticas? Eu creio que sim. A sistemática violência contra as mulheres é parte de um projeto político de morte. É preciso que mais pessoas entre nós, especialmente as que estão à frente da elaboração do acordo final nesta CSW 66 e os respectivos governos, identifiquem a violência e o feminicídio recorrentes com a exploração desenfreada dos territórios de povos e comunidades tradicionais. Obrigada por sua atenção.
Thank you so much, Renate Hieros, a pastor at the Evangelical Church of the Lutheran Confession in Brazil. She's a feminist theologian and serves the Gender Justice Officer at the Lutheran Foundation of Diaconia, Brazil. Thank you so much for this enlightening expose on the region. And we're going to move to Reverend Agostão José Zita, who has a degree in theology and was ordained as a pastor in 2014. He has worked for the Christian Council of Mozambique since October 1st, 2008, as the National Coordinator of HIV and AIDS and Gender and Human Rights. He has also been the National Program Director since June 2021 and is the Executive Secretary for the Advisory Board of the FOCCISA Health, Justice and Gender Network. The floor is yours, Mr. Zita.
Muito obrigado por esta oportunidade de poder apresentar. Não sei se alguém vai correr a tela. Mozambique is a country located in the southern region of Africa. Não consigo ver toda a tela, desculpe. Estou com problemas de não ter toda a imagem da tela.
I'm seeing the page and I am able to see it. Location of Mozambique, and there's a text in it. Is that it?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Ok. Como dizia, Moçambique está situado na parte da sul de África, banhado pelo Oceano Índico e também é composto por uma população de 32 milhões de habitantes na costa, com aproximadamente 2.515 quilômetros do Rovuma ao Maputo. E Moçambique, ela contém 11 províncias. Geograficamente, Moçambique está situado numa das zonas mais vulneráveis devido ao seu posicionamento, onde todos os países que estão na parte oeste, quando as águas vêm, eles desaguam na parte moçambicana e realmente o nosso país acaba ficando vulnerável a mudanças climáticas e que são constituídas maioritariamente pelas chuvas e ventos muito fortes. E também temos tido ultimamente situações de ciclones tropicais, onde acabamos tendo ou convivendo com mais de 3 ou 4 ciclones anuais. E isso acaba afetando também a nossa situação social e econômica, assim como política, e prejudicando também a situação do clima no nosso país. Normalmente, todas as 11 províncias do país estão realmente mais situadas na parte na parte realmente costal, onde é mesmo afetado pelas mudanças climáticas. E também há que considerar que, fora a essas situações das mudanças climáticas, nós temos convivendo com elas, também alia-se a destruição das infraestruturas. Podemos falar da situação das escolas, hospitais, pontes, estradas são destruídas devido à situação de ventos e fortes, assim como chuvas que provocam também a questão das cheias. A consequência, isso tem dado grandes consequências negativas, né? Para as populações maioritariamente compostas por mulheres e crianças que acabam ficando numa situação difícil, onde elas não têm, onde não tem a quem possa ajudar. Grande parte deles encontram-se nos centros de reassentamento, nos centros de trânsito, mas que lá falta tudo. Penso que pode subir a próxima página, por favor. Queremos também dizer que, durante estas situações, organizações humanitárias têm dado o seu apoio. Podemos falar situações como a PMA, a Diagonia, a DCA, Dan Church Aid, NCA, que é Norwegian Church Aid. Eles têm dado a sua contribuição, apoiando várias iniciativas que têm como resposta a esta situação da resposta a desastres ou a redução de risco de desastres no nosso país, que é dinamizado, ou ela é efetivamente monitorado pela parte do governo, que tem esta responsabilidade, que nós chamamos de NGD, que ele é a parte que olha para as situações de desastres naturais no nosso país. Esses desastres todos, na verdade, têm um impacto muito grande, porque elas afetam as nossas populações, como podemos falar de mulheres, podemos falar de raparigas pobres, que realmente eles não têm recursos, não têm como se erguer depois de passar por essas situações, onde em algumas vezes, numa província pode acontecer situações, ou podem passar por lá ciclones por 1 ou 2 vezes por ano, e enquanto as pessoas estão a procurar se reerguer da situação anterior, vem outro ciclone e acaba destruindo mesmo pouco que pudesse ter restado. Existe também estas componentes, as pessoas procurarem alguns lugares onde eles possam onde possam continuar com a sua vida, e que em algum momento, quando eles são alocados em regiões um pouco seguras, porque ninguém está lá para fazer o acompanhamento e ninguém está lá para realmente apoiar em termos de ter condições para continuar com a vida, acabam voltando para aqueles lugares perigosos, para aqueles lugares onde, quando vem a época chuvosa, voltam a ter o mesmo problema e encontram-se realmente numa situação de risco, e para isso precisamos realmente de continuarmos com uma da sensibilização. Falamos dos efeitos de desastres nas comunidades. Muitas vezes, essas situações não só afetam as partes, as zonas rurais, mas também, neste momento, temos vivenciado situações em que esses também acabam impactando nas cidades. As nossas cidades não estão mais seguras devido a esta problemática das mudanças climáticas. Como dizia, maioritariamente das pessoas que o nosso país é constituído por mais mulheres e jovens, podemos dizer, raparigas e alguns rapazes que ainda não têm condições, não têm como realmente poderem dar uma resposta efetiva a esta situação. E é uma situação de vulnerabilidade total, onde tudo fica complicado para uma resposta cabal, tanto por parte da igreja, assim como por parte do governo. E dizer também que Moçambique tem feito de tudo para que realmente esteja engajado na situação de uma estratégia para uma resposta desta redução de desastres, olhando para aquilo que é realmente o acordo de 99, de 1999, pelas Nações Unidas. E não tem sido realmente fácil para nós darmos a resposta no momento certo. Isso por causa da nossa da dificuldade que existe entre o plano que nós temos e aquilo que nós podíamos realmente darmos como resposta. Os estudos apontam que para cada dólar investido na prevenção pode-se poupar $7 da operação de emergência, e foram feitos apelos para que pelo menos 1% de todo o nacional de desenvolvimento seja canalizado a medidas de redução de riscos e desastres, principalmente para os mais vulneráveis, mulheres, raparigas, crianças e idosos. Existe uma variedade de medições ou de medidas, opções para proteger pessoas vulneráveis, mulheres e raparigas, os seus bens e o meio ambiente. Reduzir e gerir riscos de medidas para reduzir os potenciais impactos das ameaças. Medidas para redução de vulnerabilidade, que é o reforço da capacidade ou estratégias comunitárias em lidar-se com as medidas. Mulheres do campo e da cidade lideram e promovem ações concretas para melhoria da qualidade de vida e de um ambiente mais sustentável. Diversificam a renda, garantem a segurança alimentar, protegem protegem a biodiversidade, defendem territórios, atuam na agroecologia e na economia solidária e do bem viver, entre outras atividades. E nós podemos ver aí o ciclo de desastres nas comunidades vulneráveis, onde nós falamos dizemos qual é o problema, então, de desastres, que é o desenvolvimento bloqueado, pobreza, vulnerabilidade, assim como temos também como quebrar o ciclo de desastres nas comunidades vulneráveis. Encontramos também planos de desenvolvimento, o que integram a gestão de risco, são executados e monitorados. Desenvolvimento, pobreza, vulnerabilidade e desastres. Na gestão de desastres, dos efeitos das mudanças climáticas, a gestão de calamidades ou desastres, entre outros, é atualmente coordenado pelo Conselho de Ministros a nível central. E nós temos o NGD, que é também representado em todas as províncias e em todos os distritos, onde é presente, o NGD está presente em todas as províncias, o Centro Operacional de Emergência, que chamamos de COE, que é o Comitê Local de Gestão de Riscos, de Calamidades, de Doadores, que é o OSC, que é liderado, que é da liderança religiosa como protagonistas na mobilização comunitária sobre o risco das mudanças climáticas e difusão das boas práticas com vista a criar comunidades mais resilientes aos eventos climáticos extremos e os promovidos pela ação do próprio homem. As mulheres promovem a diversificação de culturas alimentares e a introdução de culturas de ciclo curto e resistentes à seca. E também as mulheres melhoram o sistema de armazenamento de água e sua eficiência através de provisão de armazenamento de águas de chuvas através de caleiras. E também encontramos que em algumas províncias onde temos problemas de falta de chuva, nós encontramos situações em que promovemos realmente a construção de represas de areia, onde na época chuvosa, enquanto a água vai correndo pelo rio, então nós temos um bloqueio que é construído e que esse não permite a passagem de água, e essa água serve para durante o tempo em que não haverá chuva até o próximo ciclo, nas situações onde só chove uma vez por ano, e essa água serve exatamente para a produção agrícola, assim como para usar-se para bebedouros dos animais, assim como para o consumo das comunidades nesses lugares. Nós podemos ver que as imagens que estão aí, temos mais imagens do que realmente o que apresentamos, temos problema de erosão, temos problema também das nossas habitações, que acabam, este problema que estamos a ver aqui é consequência das mudanças climáticas. Quando as pessoas vieram construir as casas neste lugar, não existia esta carteira que estamos a ver aqui e não existiam outras situações que colocam as nossas comunidades em risco, mas tudo isso aqui é consequência das mudanças climáticas. Existe também algumas iniciativas por parte do Conselho de Questão de Moçambique, que é o reflorestamento e que é o plantio das árvores, nesse caso, tanto nas cidades, assim como nas outras zonas, para que realmente isso possa ajudar na defesa do meio ambiente. São várias iniciativas que são promovidas de forma a conseguirmos mitigar o impacto das mudanças climáticas no nosso país. Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much for giving us this panoramic, very informative expose on Mozambique's issue. And I keep in mind the $1 in prevention that saves up to $7 in emergency addressing disasters. And thank you for the best practices you shared with us. And now we move to Topsiwansiri Rongrong Muang. She is the project coordinator for the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, where she coordinates and facilitates transformative courses at the School of English of Engaged Social Service, SENS, for the INEB Institute, INEB Institute, as well as environmental related programs. Mrs. Rong Wang, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, and hello from Bangkok here. Yeah, okay. I will be talking about work of INEP. Actually, as you may know, like International Network of Engaged Buddhists is actually global network, and when we want to talk about the impact of climate change to women in particular, we actually all know that women who actually has more vulnerability in terms of living. Yeah, we actually work in different fields like child protection, peace and reconciliation, gender and women empowerment, especially in terms of like living their life. And we also have Buddhist economics and different things. And the last thing is ecological and climate change aspect of it, which will be tackling particular the environmental aspect related to human life. That's why we actually have the project called Eco Temple, which use the Buddhist principles, and it entails the sufficiency economy, the education of ecology and Dharma, which is the Buddha's teaching. And we also have the Eco Temple structure where we work with the temples, and we also do surrounding environments like the public environment and also community development and energy sector. Next, please. Yeah, I would like to actually give you two examples of our work. One is this Metta Garden. Metta actually means loving kindness. And this lady, Kanchana Virakun, is a Buddhist, and she is the owner of the project Metta Garden. She is the president of Eco-Friendly Volunteers in Sri Lanka. She actually started the Metta Garden, which is the concept of doing garden in the urban area without chemicals and following the Buddha principle using the mandala garden. Mandala is actually represent universe where it's not only human who is the top of the food chain, but we would like to actually include all the sentient beings, living and non-living. And we use the spiritual and natural energy leading towards conscious consumerism and good waste management. Next, please. So you can see that there are actually two sides of the Metta Garden. One is in Colombo in Sri Lanka, and it started in 2015, where the owner actually bought the land and then started to actually implement the garden. It's in urban area, so you can't actually find a diversity in the area. And then the owner actually divided the land into 4 parts, and it represent the fire, the water, the something like solid, and the air. And these 4 parts of land, it's actually kind of like divided and has a good plan according to the permaculture principle as well. So in the water part, they actually put a small pond and grow some plant that is more watery, like cucumber, papaya. And the heat part, they use it as a composting pit because it's produce heat. And then for the air, they actually plant tall plants like trees so that it can catch the wind, so we know when the wind is coming. And for the solid part, there is a small rock garden where they grow yams and corn and a few other vegetables that know for their hardness. So this thing is, it's represent like all the elements of life, and that it's a place for practice compassion for those who suffering, and they can experience unconditional love from the nature, and they can understand the balance between ups and down, meaning that when the plant grows and in the end it will die, but they give fruits, but they give seeds, and that the seed will be planted again, and that the cycle of life. And not yet changing the slide, please. It's the same slide. Yeah. And that now in Sri Lanka, that one, the Metta Garden is open for public, and train people, especially kids, to do planting in their own garden, and considering that it's in urban area, so it actually attracts more animals, like wild animal, like I would say like butterfly, something like that, into the city, which is nice. And this garden is actually certified as organic garden under Good Market. And with the success in Sri Lanka, we actually implemented again in India, in New Delhi, which is at the Mahabodhi Society Buddhist temple, where they don't have the compost facility, and not so many plants. And when the temple is under renovation, so this Metta Garden has been kind of like implemented with the main objective, including they want to get vegetable for the monks who live there, and using the organic waste as a compost, and also bring back some urban biodiversity, and also inspiring the community for eco practice. And that you see, we planned it in circle just to represent the mandala. And during the COVID-19, when there is no supply of fresh vegetable to the temple in New Delhi, so this monk don't actually have problem having fresh food, because they have grown it in their own land. Yeah, so that's Metta Garden, which is a part of Eco Temple in INEP. Next, please. Yeah, the other project is actually in Thailand, where I'm from, initiated by Prat Sangkom, which is a monk who is a developer, and we call it Kok Nong Na, which is like the new theory agriculture, sort of like practice, which use the Buddha teaching. And the Buddha teaching is actually thinking about all beings, as I told you. And it's about sufficiency, simplicity, and balance of the material and the spirituality. And that's why we need to think about the nature, our economy, and also our society as well. And he actually involved with this new theory agriculture for more than 20 years. And it's actually kind of like blend in with the sufficiency economy philosophy of our late King Rama IX. And now with the new strategy, he emphasized on water management and land use to improve the farmer's lifestyle instead of growing the monocrop. Yeah, that's take away sort of like the diversity of the land. And he also encouraged the tree plantation that will give full benefits, which are food, and then shelter, and everyday commodities, like they can make shampoo and medicines from it. And they also get revenue, which is like economic benefit from selling the surplus. And in the end, it's actually mitigate the climate change, because we plant more trees there. Next slide, please. So you will see some photo of Kok Nong Na. Kok is highland. So in the area, we actually divided the land as well. One is kind of like a highland where we plant the tall tree, and Nong is reservoir where we store the water, so that in dry season we still have water. And Na is a paddy field, so where we go grow food. And some part of the land we also have house where we can live. So you can see like the flood picture in the central part of Thailand, like other land got flood because of, like heavy rain and then the flow of the water coming from the mountain. But Khong Nong Na land, which used this theory, hasn't been affected because it's been managed well instead of growing all rice in the same field, which is flat land. Yeah. And if you can see the top photo in the middle, that's how we actually kind of like conserve the water and get the water so that we can use throughout the year. The hole was dug to the aquifer, meaning that when the rain actually come down, it gets to the aquifer as well. So it's recharged to underground water. And that's how kind of like the earth should be balancing. So this actually would like this model has been duplicated all over Thailand, and we like the thing is it doesn't have to be the big scale, it doesn't have to be the big land. Whatever size of land that you can still use. And the fact that last year we like from the COVID-19, yeah, many people actually survive from that because it's kind of like self-sufficiency concept. And because we use the Buddhist sort of like principle as well, that's why people can live, yeah, although there are disasters. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is if you want to find more information about the projects like this run by kind of like the network of INEP. So you can go to ecotemple.net here. Yeah, and that's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so very much for this spiritual approach on facing climate challenges, and for enlightening us about the meta garden concept that not only feeds bodies but souls and heals, as you said it, be it in all the regions you named, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. And I love the concept of Khok Long Na gardening, which is based on balance and simplicity with spiritual and philosophical concepts. Amazing. Thank you so much. And now we move to Dr. Novil Wijesekara, who's a medical doctor specialized in community medicine and disaster management with additional training in diplomatic studies, international relations, human rights, and peace education. He focuses on health system resilience to disasters as a consultant attached to the Disaster Preparedness and Response Division of the Ministry of Health in Sri Lanka. His work at the Resilience Research, Training and Consulting in Sri Lanka, a think tank that he has founded, involves working with communities with a special focus on religious leaders in promoting community resilience to disasters, emergencies, climate change, pandemic, and crisis. We are all ears.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's a great honor to be here. Today, I would be sharing with you about our journey of faith, gender, and resilience, a case study from Sri Lanka. I'm representing Resilient Research Training and Consulting today. So we all know that Sri Lanka is vulnerable to disasters. About 2 years ago, Sri Lanka ranked second in the Global Climate Risk Index. We always have very large-scale disasters, such as Meriabat, the landslide, over the last few decades, which kill over hundreds of people just in one night. So it is evident that climate change is having negative impacts on the lives of people, including those of Sri Lanka. However, there is some hope. There are some great pillars of resilience that our communities can hold on to, even during this massive climate crisis. Pillars of Resilience was a project that we used to get the engagement of religious leaders in promoting community resilience, including to challenges such as climate change. We believe that religious leaders from all faith are integral component of the resilience ecosystem. As we heard from previous speakers, they help the communities to be strong and resilient in challenging times. The project that I'm going to talk to you is called Pillars of Resilience, Capacity Building of Religious Leaders on Community Resilience. It was a project funded by the US Embassy Colombo, administered through Sarvodaya. In this project, we reached out to religious leaders from different faiths of Sri Lanka. We try to train them on community resilience with special emphasis on challenges such as climate change. We were able to reach over 100 religious leaders during this project. For the project purposes, we defined community resilience as the ability of communities to bounce back and recover using its own resources, and also the ability of groups or communities to cope with external shocks and stressors as a result of social, environmental, and political change. This definition was adopted from the Disaster Management Center, Sri Lanka. We also use this community resilience framework to communicate well to the religious leaders about their role during challenging times. As you can see in this diagram, the innermost circle represents the community, the most important and pivotal element of community resilience. Then they should be equipped with risk knowledge. The communities with risk knowledge function within 5 subsystems. They are the physical, economic, human, environmental, and social subsystems. Governance is an overarching concept which consists of leadership, participation, and representation that completes the community resilience framework. Religious leaders play a very important role in this community resilience framework. For example, they are very strong players in the social subsystem. When it comes to governance, they are the born leaders in their community. Therefore, we can engage them very effectively in addressing climate change. What we did was, we reviewed the existing literature, we looked at what works best, and we developed training materials, including handbook for participants, trainer's guide, and training materials. In addition, we looked out to resilience elements in different religions, and we compiled them into a booklet called a Cross-Cultural Notes for Religious Leaders. So while engaging them in the climate crisis, we tried to promote harmony and cohesion as well. As you may know, during disasters, emergencies, and crises, gender-based violence increases. They have found that maternal mortality in crisis settings is about 2 times more than during normal settings. So disasters and emergencies are settings where women and girls are disproportionately affected. And this was a critical factor that we wanted to bring to the attention of religious leaders. We provided education to religious leaders on how to promote community resilience. and also how they could take practical measures to promote sexual and reproductive health of women and girls during emergencies. In addition to the lectures, we conduct a simulation exercise where religious leaders had hands-on opportunity to test the things that we learn. So they engaged in a simulation exercise of planning a religious place to host a large group of incoming displaced persons. So this gave them opportunity to understand the importance of ensuring simple steps that could contribute to promotion of sexual and reproductive health and prevention of gender-based violence. For example, having male and female separate toilets with accessibility, well lighting, and toilets which could be locked from inside could be safeguards against gender-based violence. So some of the learnings and the networks that we developed through this project, we could use during the Correct-19 project, funded by the European Union, supported through the network and implemented through Servode. We developed some roles of religious leaders during the COVID-19 pandemic, which were based on the connections and the network that we have already developed. Let me conclude with 3 lessons on faith, climate, and gender. First lesson, religious and faith leaders are pillars of resilience of our communities. Second lesson, capacity building of religious and faith leaders could contribute towards promoting climate resilience. Thirdly, religions and faith leaders should be engaged as proactive stakeholders in promoting sexual and reproductive health rights during emergencies. Here are our contact details, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity.
Wow. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for introducing us to the model you created, faith, gender, and resilience in Sri Lanka, and the pillars of change and engaging religious figures by taking the best practices in different religions and teaching religious figures or helping religious figures take action and be active leaders in their communities facing all what comes with climate change or climate crisis, especially regarding women and GBV. That is really enlightening. Thank you so much, and I really personally would like to learn more about your model, because I think it could be implemented everywhere. Thank you so much for this, Dr. Noville. And now we move to Hamid Constantin Chibozo, who is working as program manager and a Regreening Africa project coordinator at World Vision in Niger. He's an agricultural engineer, expert in agricultural production and rural development. He's also a passionate environmental conservationist and working as a focal point for sustainable management of natural resources, adaptation to climate change, and community resilience. Mr. Chibozo. Mr. Chibozo, we can't hear you. I don't know. Yes, now we can hear
merci,
you.
Tania.
Merci beaucoup, merci à vous. Voilà, maintenant on vous entend.
Merci, OK. Donc, comme je disais, hein, le changement climatique, comme partout ailleurs, est un grand défi aussi pour mon pays, le Niger. Et les effets varient selon les régions au sein même du pays, selon les générations, l'âge, les classes sociales et les groupes de revenus, et aussi le sexe. Je l'ai entendu dans toutes les présentations, et le Niger n'est pas exception à cela. Les femmes et les jeunes filles sont les plus affectées par les effets du changement climatique. Donc, je m'en vais vous présenter un cas qui nous, au Niger, permet de renforcer la résilience de ces communautés de façon générale, mais aussi plus des femmes et des jeunes. Voilà. Donc, c'est un projet qui s'appelle Regreening Africa, qui est mis en œuvre dans 8 pays, dont le Niger, et qui est mis en œuvre par World Vision et Care International. Donc, ce projet, il est mis en œuvre dans la région de Tillabéri. Slide, s'il vous plaît. Donc, le projet, comme je le dis, vous voyez la carte du Niger, est mise en œuvre dans la région de Tillabéri dans 3 communes qui sont Walam, Simiri et Hamdalaï. Ces communes, pourquoi? Parce que c'est des communes de convergence pour le Niger, c'est-à-dire que c'est des communes où la vulnérabilité est apparente. Donc, des projets du genre pour développer la résilience des communautés sont orientés vers ces communes-là. Donc, dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de ce programme, nous avons comme partenaires stratégiques les ministères sectoriels, l'agriculture, l'environnement, l'élevage, et aussi des personnes ressources des instituts de recherche, mais aussi des acteurs locaux tels que les leaders religieux et les leaders d'opinion. Slide. Donc, l'objectif de ce projet, c'est concourir aux efforts qui sont déjà consentis dans le pays pour accroître la sécurité alimentaire des communautés et aussi accroître leur résilience face au choc climatique. Donc, en termes plus clairs, comme vous voyez sur le slide, des images de gauche, c'est comment transformer notre environnement où nous avons toutes les formes d'érosion, toutes les formes de dégradation de terre, de nos écosystèmes, comment les transformer en des écosystèmes beaucoup plus productifs et pouvant générer des ressources à ces communautés-là déjà pauvres. Donc, nous avons une ambition de couvrir 90 000 hectares de pratiques de reverdissement dans la régénération naturelle assistée, le FMNA, et cela en impliquant 40 000 producteurs. Voilà. Donc, ce travail, il est fait en faisant un grand focus sur les femmes et les jeunes et aussi en impliquant tous les acteurs au niveau local. Slide. Donc, comme je le disais, nous faisons focus sur les femmes et cela se fait à travers différentes activités. L'activité phare pour laquelle les femmes sont impliquées dans les actions de reverdissement, c'est déjà le FMNR, comme je l'ai dit tantôt. Et il se retrouve que dans nos zones, il y a une dégradation tellement accrue que cette technologie qui est aujourd'hui la moins coûteuse au monde n'est pas facilement praticable. Donc, des réflexions ont été menées et il est convenu de faire des plantations d'enrichissement. Donc, pour concourir à ce résultat-là de plantation, soutenir la FMNR qui est déjà en cours, les femmes sont renforcées dans les villages d'intervention où il est mis en place des pépinières, comme vous voyez sur les images, qui sont entièrement gérées par des groupes de femmes. Donc, ces femmes reçoivent du projet un appui technique, un appui en équipement et aussi un accompagnement pour le développement du marché. Donc, ce que je voudrais mentionner à ce niveau, c'est que ces femmes sont organisées en ce que nous appelons des saving groups. Donc, cela leur permet aussi de générer des ressources à travers leur activité et mettre aussi à profit ces ressources-là pour renforcer l'économie de leur ménage et donc subvenir aux besoins de leurs enfants. Slide. Donc, ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que dans le contexte du Niger et un peu plus général en Afrique de l'Ouest, l'accès aux ressources naturelles est très difficile pour les femmes, notamment la terre, qui est aujourd'hui un débat qui est sur la table. Toutes les organisations militent pour que cet accès à la terre soit quelque chose qui devient, qui est résolu comme problème. Et donc, pour cela, dans nos zones d'intervention, nous avons plusieurs milliers d'hectares qui sont hautement dégradés, comme vous le voyez sur les images. Et donc, des réflexions ont été menées et des pratiques comme le creusage des demi-lunes et des ailes sont organisées sur ce genre d'espace-là au profit des femmes. Donc, ce sont des terres hautement dégradées qui sont récupérées, qui sont ensuite valorisées et confiée aux femmes pour une exploitation agricole. Donc, cela permet aux femmes non seulement d'avoir accès à la ressource, mais aussi de produire beaucoup plus de nourriture pour leur consommation personnelle et dans un second temps aussi avoir accès au marché et générer des ressources. Les femmes s'occupent principalement de l'activité de l'agriculture de subsistance, en particulier l'horticulture et le petit élevage, l'élevage de cases, et surtout dans le but de la consommation familiale. Dans les conditions climatiques extrêmes, comme les périodes de sécheresse, les inondations, elles tendent à travailler plus pour garantir leurs moyens de subsistance, ce qui leur laisse moins de temps pour se consacrer à la formation, à l'éducation, au développement des compétences et pour percevoir un revenu. On sait déjà que le taux d'analphabétisation des femmes en Afrique est très, très élevé et principalement pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest, cela est au-delà de 55%. Il y a aussi comme effet néfaste de nombreux aspects culturels qui empêchent les femmes d'immigrer et de chercher des refuges dans les autres lieux ou de rechercher un emploi lorsque des catastrophes surviennent. Slide. Donc, tout notre travail focalisé sur les femmes est fait à travers, comment dirais-je, un engouement qui est suscité au niveau local. Donc, nous impliquons, comme je l'ai dit, les leaders religieux. Il faut noter que le Niger est à 99% musulmans. Et donc, les leaders religieux sont des personnes hautement écoutées dans le milieu rural et de façon générale dans le pays. Donc, nous nous basons sur ces leaders religieux et d'autres producteurs phares qui sont nos producteurs pilotes pour diffuser des messages de sensibilisation, mais aussi transmettre des connaissances dans le sens d'amener les femmes à pratiquer, à mieux pratiquer certaines technologies. On a constaté, comme je l'ai dit, une grande dégradation des terres qui est aussi due à l'action de l'homme. Dans les communes où nous intervenons dans le cadre de ce projet, la seule ressource accessible pour générer une économie, c'est la coupe abusive du bois et la commercialisation de ce bois-là. Donc, cela a impacté énormément sur l'environnement depuis plusieurs décennies. Donc, une des technologies que nous avons apportées, donc pour $1, les femmes dans les villes où nous intervenons arrivent à confectionner ce foyer-là. Et quelques temps après, nous avons mené une petite évaluation pour ressortir l'impact de l'utilisation de ces foyers-là. Donc, quelques exemples en termes d'impact positif, c'est que nous avons remarqué une grande diminution de la coupe du bois qui déjà se raréfie dans l'environnement. Et aussi, pour certains ménages, le coût de ce bois qui généralement est acheté en raison d'un demi-dollar par jour, qui aujourd'hui, pour $1 de bois, arrive à couvrir le besoin de la semaine. Donc, on a aussi constaté que les enfants qui sont les plus affectés aussi, parce que passent plus de temps dans les terroirs pour ramasser le bois mort, arrivent à le faire ne serait-ce qu'une fois par semaine et donc arrivent à consacrer plus de temps à leurs études et à l'école. Donc, un autre impact aussi, c'est qu'on a remarqué qu'il y a une grande réduction du temps de cuisson. Donc, malgré que les femmes ont cet accès difficile à la terre, je l'ai dit, elles sont renforcées et formées sur la technique de FMNR et cela leur permet aussi de contribuer aux efforts des hommes producteurs, mais aussi des autres acteurs pour garantir une sécurité alimentaire. Slide. Donc, vous voyez les images sur le slide qui nous montrent ici des séances de formation de groupements de femmes pour, d'une part, la production de plants pépinières, d'autre part, pour le FMNA, mais aussi des sensibilisations qui sont conduites pour la cohésion sociale et la contribution aux différents efforts qui sont menés sur le terrain. Donc, ces sensibilisations sont principalement faites souvent durant les prêches, mais aussi à travers les canaux des les médias locaux, les radios communautaires, où nous avons des émissions pour toucher le plus grand nombre de public. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que le Niger est un pays qui est dans une situation d'insécurité et principalement la zone de Walam fait frontière avec le Mali. Donc, cela réduit un peu la mobilité de l'équipe projet et même de toutes les ONG pour aller vers les communautés et implémenter les activités. Donc, nous basons nos interventions sur les acteurs locaux, comme je l'ai dit, les leaders d'opinion, les imams et des comités qui sont mis au niveau des villages pour conduire toutes les séances de renforcement de capacité, mais aussi de suivi et de collecte de données. Slide. Slide, please. Donc, on voit à l'image ici des séances de prêche, comme je l'avais dit plus tôt. Donc, ce sont des séances qui sont conduites par les imams qui, dans un premier temps, sont formés par le projet sur les ambitions et les objectifs du projet, mais qui transposent ces connaissances-là avec les écrits des livres saints. Généralement, pour le Niger, en grande majorité, les écrits du Coran qui sont utilisés pour renforcer cette sensibilisation-là au niveau des communautés de façon générale, mais plus précisément au niveau des femmes. Donc, on voit aussi une image d'un prédicateur qui, à travers les radios communautaires, diffuse aussi des connaissances et puis des informations en vue de sensibiliser les communautés. Slide. Slide, please. Donc, on voit ici quelques actions aussi qui sont menées dans le sens de soutenir les efforts qui sont consentis dans le cadre de ce projet. Donc, les associations de jeunesse sont aussi impliquées dans la conduite de ce projet-là. Les enfants reçoivent une éducation environnementale de façon à comprendre qu'il y a des bons gestes qui doivent être observés pour sauvegarder nos écosystèmes. Et nous avons aussi l'implication des autorités à tous les niveaux, au niveau local et au niveau national, pour non seulement soutenir les efforts qui sont consentis, en notamment mettant en place des lois qui garantissent, mais aussi protègent les ressources naturelles au niveau local. Donc, les priorités et les besoins des femmes doivent être pris en compte dans les projets de développement, ainsi que pour leur financement, ce qui n'est pas le cas aujourd'hui. Donc, on sait que les femmes devraient prendre part aux instances de décision. Donc, le projet milite aussi dans ce sens pour garantir cette contribution des femmes-là qui n'est pas à négliger, connaissant les impacts du changement climatique. Il importe également d'encourager les investissements prenant en compte les dimensions sexo-spécifiques dans les programmes d'adaptation et d'atténuation au changement climatique, les transferts de technologies et le renforcement de capacités surtout, qui n'est pas à négliger. Slide. Donc, je l'ai dit tantôt, un des gros défis pour nous, c'est cette situation d'insécurité que vit notre pays, principalement dans la zone où nous mettons en œuvre ce projet. Et cela réduit de façon considérable la mobilité des équipes des ONG pour aller vers les communautés. Mais cependant, nos stratégies ont été réorientées vers les organisations de base, les leaders religieux, comme je l'ai dit, les leaders traditionnels pour continuer à implémenter les activités du projet. Slide. Je suis à la fin de la présentation. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chibozo, for your Regreening Africa project that helped changing the erosion nature into a living ecosystem, and targeted women primarily to be the key players. And we could see how it impacted the lives of not only women, but their children and their families. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, everyone, to all our speakers, because I think we go back today to our lives richer with more information and more enlightening about how to face climate crisis in a constructive way, and what are our roles as religious-based organizations into that. But we still have like 10 minutes for Q&As. So in case you have any question you would like to ask, it's now the time. I would invite you to go to the chat box. We have been, there's Suzanne Karaman, who shared the Baha'i experience, international community, as a contribution to the discussions. She shared a link. And we have a question that was written way before. I'm going to ask it right now while waiting for your questions. How can we raise our voices in our churches and local communities to get to call for action for women and girls' plight due to our own actions? And then how can we reach the citizens and the governments who kill forests and oceans? So who would like to answer that question? How can we raise our voices in our churches and local communities to call for action for women? Who would like to answer among our speakers? Dr. Nobliel.
I would like to answer that question.
Okay.
So it is very important that religious leaders are given the necessary skill set to do that. You know, the most important thing about religious leaders is that they have unlimited amount of compassion and dedication. If you see our projects have deadlines, our projects have outputs, our projects have budgets, but religious leaders don't have that. They are with their communities forever, and they are unconditional in their support. So it's just so important to make them aware that they're so important in their community and their role beyond their churches. So it's just giving that little skill set that we did in our project, and making them realize their role and giving them little tools to do the job better, because they have all the soft skills. They need a little bit of training. And one thing that needs to be addressed through religious leader training in the formative years of religious leaders is that these aspects need to be integrated into the training in the seminaries, in the madrasas, or in the Buddhist schools. That is one thing. And advocacy skills are so important. If you want religious leaders to go and reach out to the governments and talk about these issues like climate change and pollution, they need a different set of skills than they use in preaching with the community. So if they give those things, I think religious leaders have all the energy and inspiration to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very true. I don't know, maybe who would like also to give an answer? Maybe Pastor Renate, would you like to answer? How can people raise their voices in their churches? Because maybe religious figures are the closest to them. Would you like to answer that? And then we'll give the floor to Reverend Agostão. But Pastor Renate.
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado pela pergunta. Todos sabemos que a igreja está na comunidade. Por isso, é muito importante que as lideranças religiosas sejam capacitadas na matéria de mudanças climáticas, para que os líderes possam incluir nos seus sermões, nas suas pregações, durante os cultos, né? Incluir também a importância de sensibilizar as comunidades na mitigação do impacto das mudanças climáticas. Quando nós tivermos a liderança capacitada, ela estará em altura de dar a melhor resposta, apoiando as comunidades realmente a perceber o que é isso de mudanças climáticas, de forma a prevenirmos que elas, quando os ciclos aconteçam, apanham as populações de forma desprevenida, mas teremos a liderança capacitada de modo a sensibilizar as comunidades a abandonar realmente as zonas de risco. Muito obrigado.
Eu gostaria de contribuir com essa resposta, com a reflexão de que eu estou falando a partir da experiência de mulheres indígenas. E como igrejas e como instituições diaconais vinculadas a essas igrejas, as nossas tarefas são bastante grandes. E uma questão que me parece fundamental é o diálogo intercultural e interreligioso, porque nós temos a nossa fé cristã. Quando lidamos com povos de outras culturas e outros modos de vida e de espiritualidade também, temos que ter, enquanto lideranças religiosas, enquanto membros e membras de comunidades, e enquanto igrejas, abertura para este outro, para esta outra forma de viver a espiritualidade. E se a gente se fecha num fundamentalismo, que no Brasil atualmente é muito forte, o fundamentalismo cristão religioso é extremamente forte, está distribuindo discursos de ódio em relação aos povos indígenas, e com a invasão das terras indígenas e com a não demarcação de terras indígenas, isso traz insegurança para as meninas e as mulheres. Isso traz também a dificuldade de proteger essas terras indígenas do agronegócio, da monocultura, do arrendamento de terras, que tudo tem a ver com e que levam a emergências climáticas, que levam a conflitos e que trazem muito mais violências, como também falou Novil, que os desastres e emergências trazem violência baseada em gênero. Para mim, elas também trazem situações de feminicídio, pois o feminicídio ele não acontece somente em espaços urbanos, em casas, mas acontece também, e cada vez mais, entre as mulheres no campo, entre as mulheres indígenas também, e de uma forma muito cruel e muito violenta. Então, para mim, também tem a ver essa questão da espiritualidade, mas a questão também de uma abertura a um diálogo intercultural e interreligioso.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And maybe, I don't know if Mrs. Topsy or Mr. Hamid would like to add to this conversation, to this question, before I give the microphone back to Jessica. Mrs. Topsy, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I can.
Merci.
I can share a bit about, like, in Buddhist society, like we actually have temples in almost every villages in Thailand and Southeast Asia. So it's actually pretty easy to get access to these temples and talk to the monks and nuns. But the fact is that not every temple works on issues that is in society. So sometimes you need to approach to different agents that they work on it, not necessarily the monastic people. Yeah, that's my experience. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Hamid, Mr. Hamid.
Oui, merci Tania. Donc, ce que je voudrais rajouter par rapport à cette question, quand on prend le cas du Niger, je l'ai dit pendant ma présentation, c'est un pays à 99% musulmans. Donc, World Vision étant une ONG de confession chrétienne qui s'installe dans un pays où 99% de la population sont musulmans, il était important de pouvoir toucher le maximum de personnes. Et comment arriver à ce résultat? Il fallait forcément impliquer les leaders religieux, qui sont ces personnes-là qui sont mieux écoutées, qui servent de guide pour les communautés, surtout dans le milieu rural où on sait que des considérations culturelles sont aussi présentes et rendent difficile l'accès aux communautés et le changement de mentalité. Donc, c'est un pilier assez important que constituent ces leaders-là, et c'est sur eux que se base la stratégie de revision de façon globale pour toucher les communautés les plus vulnérables.
Merci beaucoup. I will translate it briefly since I think we lost the English translation. What Mr. Hamid was sharing with us is that with the Niger having 99% of Muslim population, it was very important to touch the maximum of people, of citizens, and religious figures, imams, are key pillars in that reach out for civilians. So they were considered pillars, and educating them and reaching religious figures was a key to reach people everywhere. So this is briefly what Mr. Hamid said. And since I don't see any more questions, I don't see questions, so I think our time is almost up. I'm gonna give it back to you, Jessica. And before that, I really thank you for this very enlightening session. I wasn't just a moderator, I was an active participant, and I'm educated even more today on the topic. Jessica?
Thank you, Tanya. And thank you to all of the speakers and the partners and interpreters who helped to put on this event. I hope we've all learned a lot on this subject. And just to say, because we're at time, that the Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers will be following up with recordings of this event for you to be able to share amongst your own networks and connections. And we will also be sharing the video that was recorded and shared at the beginning of the event for other people to also be able to watch. So again, thank you everyone for such a great event, and thanks to all the panelists and our amazing moderator for all of the great contributions.